Well, good morning and welcome to Hudson Institute. I'm Ken Weinstein, President and CEO of Hudson Institute. I'm delighted to welcome everyone and especially delighted to be doing this event collaboratively with Freedom House, which is a long and distinguished record on human rights. We at Hudson, we've got a long-time friendship with Freedom House. Two of our Hudson Senior Fellows serve on the Freedom House board, Carol Edelman, who's here, and Michael Pillsbury, who we will be hearing from shortly, the noted China expert. And Freedom House's famous index, Freedom in the World, was actually developed by Raymond Gastile, a former Hudson Institute fellow, and at least in Hudson Institute Apocrypha, the claim is that he developed the concept for this idea while he was at Hudson. You know? So, you know,
I can't vouch for that. Got to check with Arch to know.
It may be fake news, but that's at least what we hold here at Hudson. But
it's good enough.
and I think all of us at Hudson Institute are especially honored that we're doing this forum in memory of Mark Palmer here at Hudson. Mark was a great friend of Hudson Institute, a tireless champion of democratic principles and liberty in Eastern Europe and beyond, worked very closely with Hudson over the years. And I can remember the first time I came across Mark, I was a PhD student in Boston and saw him on the McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour talking about Hungary, and I was deeply impressed and only grew to be more impressed with him and his dedication to the cause of freedom through our interactions over the years. Mark was always on the cutting edge of the fight for freedom, for democracy, for freedom of the press, and I know Mike Abramowitz here is president of Freedom House, a good friend and someone honored to be doing this event with, and I both know that were Mark around with us today, this would have been a hugely important issue for him. The forum is, of course, on an issue that means a great deal to us at Hudson and obviously a great deal to Freedom House, China's global challenge to democratic freedom. Just a couple of weeks ago at this very place, Vice President Mike Pence delivered a momentous speech on U.S.-China relations and spoke specifically about the Chinese global challenge to democratic freedom and also Chinese interference in the American political process. And it's an issue that we at Hudson have worked on for some time. We have a long track record on this issue, one that predates Xi Jinping's authoritarian turn. The Hudson director of our Center on Chinese Strategy, Mike Pillsbury, has written widely on this theme. Mike is, of course, the author of a seminal book, The 100-Year Marathon, which unveils China's hidden strategy for global domination. The book is widely read on Capitol Hill, widely read in the White House, and increasingly widely read in China in both official and pirated versions, I am told. And Mike will be here to offer concluding remarks, but other fellows have worked on these issues as well. Senior fellows Eric Brown and Charles Horner have for some time written at length about the importance of the Taiwan model of democratic development in the Sinosphere. Eric has, of course, done a lot of work on Xinjiang and the threat to freedom facing the Uyghurs and what is increasingly the most dramatic challenge to human rights of our time. The re-education camps where 10% of the Uyghur population has been sent, and recently we had a speaker here at Hudson Institute, Rushan Abbas, a former reporter for Radio Free Asia, who, after being on a panel here at Hudson Institute, her aunt and sister were taken to re-education camps, which absolutely tragic, and it shows the personal price of speaking out for human rights in China, which makes this global challenge all the more difficult. We will hear later from Ting Biao, the heroic human rights lawyer who has been harassed even here in exile. Lastly, in terms of Hudson work on this, I want to highlight the important paper written by Jonas Pereyo-Plessner on Chinese Communist Party interference operations and how democracies can counter them. This was, prior to the Vice President's speech, the first mapping of interference operations in the United States and had very specific recommendations on how democracies can counter these operations. Jonas worked closely with the Trump administration and other executive branch stakeholders, and his recommendations have had concrete impact. So I'm delighted that we have three very distinguished panels today, one looking at the political setting, one looking at the media setting, and one looking at the academic setting. It's an all-star lineup. The media issue is especially close to my heart. I am chairman of the Broadcasting Board of Governors and chairman of the board of Radio Free Asia, and delighted that Bei Feng, the executive editor of Radio Free Asia, is here and taking part in this. She is a leader on these issues. Let me note, unfortunately, I need to sneak out the door momentarily since I'm off to Tokyo for a conference and a U.S.-Japan-India trilateral dialogue, but I'm delighted to welcome Freedom House President Mike Abramowitz to the podium. Mike is an old friend. We got to know each other when you were the White House correspondent for the Washington Post during the George W. Bush years. And at the end of the administration, I got an email from you. I thought you were looking for information on a story. It turned out that you had a big announcement to make, that you were leaving the Washington Post to go work at the Holocaust Museum, where eventually you became the director of the Levine Institute for Holocaust Education. You're a tireless champion for human rights, and you've been a remarkable leader at Freedom House. So without any further ado, over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your partnership. We're really excited about this conference today, and we're actually thrilled to be partnering with Hudson. I do want to just say a quick word about Mark Palmer, in whose name this conference is being held. At Freedom House, if you come to Freedom House, we have a Mark Palmer room, and there's a great picture there of him when he was ambassador to Hungary in the late 80s, basically marching with the Hungarian opposition against tyrannical communist rule. And he's a very inspiring figure for us. What I just discovered more recently is that from Sushma, his widow, who's one of our trustees, and I'm very sorry that Sushma's not here. She's sick. She always comes to these forums, but hopefully she'll be better. And she's been needling me for a while that we should be doing more on China. She's absolutely right. But Mark himself, I discovered, had a great deal of interest in this issue. He was actually a founding board member of the Friends of Falun Gong USA. He really understood the true nature of the Communist Party in China, the repression domestically, and he was an early and vocal advocate of boosting U.S. support for technologies to allow Chinese citizens to kind of jump the Great Firewall, which we've written about at Freedom House and others too. So we're really inspired by him, and I think if he were alive today, he'd be here as a panelist talking about what we need to do. We do want to thank Sushma for her generosity in making this forum possible. I especially want to thank my good friend Bobby Herman. Bobby, as many of you know, is our senior advisor at Freedom House, and he's a great champion of human rights, and really working with Jonas from Perello from Hudson, put together an amazing panel. I'm thrilled about the group that's been assembled today. Sadly, Senator Rubio wasn't false advertising. We thought he was going to come, and but the hurricane, I think, in Florida, made it. He had some issues to deal with down there. So
we're blaming the Chinese for that.
Oh, did they create the hurricane? But he's been out there on this issue as well. I see a number of my trustees. I want to recognize Allison Fortier, Monde from the Wilson Center. Thank you for coming. As Ken said, today's topic, China's challenge China's global challenge to democratic, could not be more important. We really feel at Freedom House this is one of the top 2 or 3 human rights issues in the world today. If you look at our Freedom of the World report, we're going to have a new one coming out in a couple months. Actually, next week, we have our Freedom on the Net report coming out, and the role of China in exporting digital authoritarianism is a major feature of that report. So we're quite concerned about the role of China, not only in repressing its own citizens, but also in trying to export its influence beyond its borders on these issues, intimidating people from, just as Ken mentioned, the speaker you had, and going after their family. But we really feel that this has been an issue we've been watching for a while, and it's accelerated, obviously, under the current Chinese president. So we're really hoping today to unpack these issues at this conference. And we have 3 panels. The first is going to look at do a broad overview of the breadth and depth of the Chinese Communist Party's sophisticated multi-pronged strategy for shaping developments in every region of the world. Our second panel is going to focus on the media and on Beijing's attempts to influence the media, both inside China and also to subvert the efforts of overseas Chinese journalists and activists to expose and challenge Chinese government censorship and propaganda. And then the third panel will discuss China's interference in American higher education, including through Confucius Institutes, student associations, and even Communist Party party cells at American universities. And some universities are going to extremes so as not to offend the Chinese government by canceling certain speakers. And there are concerns that scholars are also self-censoring. So this is an issue that we're going to be looking at. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. And thank you, Ken, for your friendship and partnership. And I think we're going to turn it over now to Carolyn Bartholomew, who's the vice chair of the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission and our distinguished moderator to get us going on the first panel. So, Carolyn, the floor is yours.